Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rose Political Podcast. My name is Alejandro Ramos, and I am your host. Today's episode is titled Exit Polls and Polarization, and I'm joined once again by Dr. Gary L. Rose, Chair of the Department of Government here at Sacred Heart University, and frequent media commentator. Dr. Rose, how are you doing today?
Doing fine, Alejandro. Looking forward to
another
lively discussion today.
Yes, glad to hear. I think today is, there'll be a lot of numbers that we talk about,
Sure.
But I think there'll be a lot of discussion with each of them. Mm-hmm. So it's, with the last few podcast episodes, we've talked about, at this point, we would have talked about the Connecticut elections, the national and federal elections, and some of the governorships. And the last episode that you guys watched was Trump and everything Trump, the primaries, what's that going to look like? So I thought it was, it would be interesting to go sort of backwards a little bit and then talk about these exit polls, because polarization is such a big thing in our country today, and we see it across the board. It's Republicans say I'm Republican and don't care about the left. Democrats say I'm Democrat, don't care about the right, and no one really wants to come together to have these conversations. So I think it's good that we're talking about this because we'll be able to see the real breakdown of how, genders, education, race, all that comes into play when people are voting and they go to the ballot.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see here as we go through these NBC exit polls, we're really talking in some respects, and I don't really want to engage in hyperbole here, but two nations in one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the polarization was glaring in this last election.
It was.
A couple areas not as bad, but in most demographic areas, as we're about to discuss, polarization very real and very evident.
Yeah.
Sure.
And some of you guys will see as we read off these numbers, sometimes they're really neck and neck. Some of the categories, you'll have something at 40, 43%, and the other in the 50s, and then, just a certain group of people that didn't answer that specific question of the exit poll. But, in some of them, then we'll see as we flip through the, this packet, that there's a big glaring difference that you're like, wow, this is in the 70s and,
right.
The other one's in the 20s. So we'll get started right away with gender.
Okay.
I think this one right away, if we had to pause and everyone had to take a guess on, where the men fell, where females fell within the political spectrum, I think everyone could take a good stab at that. But just to read off the numbers, males today, after the 2022 election, were 42% Democrat and 56% Republicans.
Oh, yeah. Males voted Republican overwhelmingly here compared to women. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And conversely, women voted heavily Democrat.
They did.
According to this poll here, 53% versus 45%.
Mm-hmm.
A big gender gap.
There is.
And, Alejandro, when I tell my students this, when I was their age, some time ago, there was no gender gap in American politics.
Yeah.
There were the chance of women voting Republican and men voting Democrat. It was a lot of crossover and a lot of centrist voting. But now, in terms of gender, you can see really a pretty stark divide here. Yeah, and so, a lot of it has to do with issues, of course. But why is it that women are so heavily Democrat today? Reproductive rights,
absolutely,
a huge issue that showed up in the election. Healthcare issues, social services, and those values. And I think equality in the workforce. All of those issues are on the side of the Democratic Party largely, and that's showing up in this gender divide that took place in this last congressional election.
What I do find interesting, though, by looking at this, is there's a wider spread within the Democratic and Republican men than there is with the Democratic and Republican women. Mm-hmm. I found, I would think that there would be a much more stark difference, when it came to women, that there would be overwhelmingly a lot more of them being Democrats than Republicans. But if you look at it again, the males are 42-56, and the females are 53-45. Mm-hmm. So there is a wider spread within the males.
Yeah.
And, I will say, just for the viewers, just so that if I don't make it clear when I'm reading off numbers, the first number will always be the Democrat. because it appears on the left-hand side for, obvious reasons. And then the second number will be the Republicans because it's on the right-hand side. But yeah, I just found that interesting, and I thought there would be, going into this and doing this research, I thought there was going to be a wider
an even
spread.
larger gap among women voters.
Among women, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are women out there who are conservative on economic issues, and we are increasingly finding more women going into businesses and women entrepreneurs. And I think that has drawn them to the Republican side.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're right. I mean, the gap is much larger among male voters, but among women, you're right. I mean, a little bit of a surprise there that we did find, if you will, a fairly, even though it's still in the minority, a pretty respectable percentage of women voting Republican. And again, I think that has to do with really their movement into private businesses and corporations and so forth. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Oh. Well, the state of the economy doesn't really help with any of those people, whether you're a man, woman, doesn't matter your gender or where you fall on any type of spectrum. Yeah. The economy is, a way that a lot of people are voting with. Sometimes people vote with their pockets, and could you blame them? I mean, the interest rates are so high, the inflation is out of control. I went to the supermarket the other day to buy vegetables, and it was $60, and I bought, a few zucchinis, tomatoes, cucumbers, things like that for the week, and it's ridiculous. But I don't know. All that is real interesting. Then if we go into race, overwhelmingly in this poll taken, there were more whites than anyone else that took this poll. 73%. 73%, 11% blacks, 11% Latinos, 2% Asians, 1% Indian Americans, and 2% others. But then we'll go through the breakdown of where people fell. Overwhelmingly, the whites are Republican.
Very much so. And
40 to 58.
Yeah, sure. And that's not too surprising.
No.
I mean, the Republican Party largely appeals to many working class and middle class, and now and some wealthier whites too. And many whites do have some issues with the progressive social agenda of the Democratic Party. And I don't want to say that just white voters are voting Republican over race alone, but it is a perception that some of them have that maybe the Democratic Party has moved a little too quickly, too liberal, too accommodating to racial minorities as opposed to their own interests. So, I think that's part of it. And really, this is something, this racial divide that we're seeing. Much of it has to do with what began back actually in the 60s, and that was the civil rights movement, which a lot of Southern whites, were at one time Democrats, as you know, from taking my party's course, but then many of them realigned with the Republican Party, making the Republican Party even whiter. Yeah. And that's what it did. And so much of it is rooted in that.
Yeah. No, for sure. And then if we look at blacks, which there's no surprise here, 86 to 13. 86% of black African-American individuals voted with Democrats. To me, there was no surprise there. I was even expecting it to be a little bit more, maybe even in the 90s with this. But tell me why you think this is where we're at.
Well, that has to do largely with a couple things. First of all, the social justice, parts of the Democratic Party's agenda. I mean, we've looked at the party platforms in our classes, and you can see that they speak to really black voters very directly. The Democratic Party is the party of affirmative action. It is the party of also, government programs that certainly are more likely to favor impoverished people, and as opposed to Republican Party programs. So it's a combination, I think, of really the social justice platform of the Democratic Party combined with with federal programs that have been beneficial to poor people, and also, there are a good number of strong black leaders that also are able to mobilize the black vote at election time to get them to the polls too. So the Republicans don't have much success with black voters, despite the many years of civil rights that was passed in the 60s and 70s. But still, it's the language of the Democratic Party that I think speaks to Black America, really, and I think that's very important, for them.
That's an interesting perspective. And then we go into the Hispanic and Latino vote, 60 to 39. This, to me, was no surprise, considering that I wrote a paper for you for political parties on the Hispanic and Latino vote, and we constantly send each other different articles. I really enjoy the articles that you send me regarding this, but it's seemingly more and more Latinos and Hispanics are going away, from the Democratic Party and coming into the Republican Party. I think that, it's not a monolithic vote. Although, you read a lot of these articles and, it makes it seem like, oh, all Hispanics vote Democrat or all, this, that. But we've seen this change, I would say, within the past, 6 to 8 years. We've seen this big change within the Latino community. And again, a lot of reporters, a lot of people reporting on this makes it seem like it's one giant voting block. And that's really not the case.
Not at all.
As I wrote in my paper, as I continue to study, it's the Latino, depends where you're from, Cubans, I'm Cuban, tend to be a lot more conservative than, let's say, Central and South Americans. There's some certain Central and South Americans that tend to be more conservative than the rest of them. And you would think, again, everyone lumps us all together and says, oh, you guys are all the same, and you guys are all, you all speak Spanish, so everyone must be the same.
Hardly.
And there's a big stark difference. All of our cultures are a little bit different. Sure, we all sort of eat similar foods and whatnot, but our cultures are so different, it really impacts the way that then we go out to the voting booth and vote. So tell me a little bit about why, especially the Cuban vote, why you think the Cuban vote is so different than the rest of the population.
And you're right. When you talk about Marco Rubio, Cuban American, you can see how well he did down there in Florida. And the roots of the Cuban American / Republican vote actually can be traced back to the 1960s. And that was the infamous and disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. And it was an invasion that was coordinated by the Eisenhower administration, the CIA. They were trained in Guatemala, these Cuban exiles. They were going to come back into Cuba to try to overthrow Castro. And then when President Kennedy arrived, he learned about the plans and authorized it. And at the last moment, really, he withdrew air cover for the exiles as they were landing at this place called the Bay of Pigs. And they were, many of them killed and captured. The whole thing was a disaster. Well, President Kennedy was a Democrat. And many older Cubans certainly never forgave Kennedy for that, or the Democratic Party. And, they're vehemently anti-communist. And then you have the Republican candidates who did come across as much more anti-communist, like Ronald Reagan, for example, and Nixon, too, before him. And so I think you put it together, what happened at the Bay of Pigs, now the grandparents of these kids certainly are passing down these views about the weakness of the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party is soft on communism, whereas the Republican Party, they probably are more likely to hear that the Republicans stood up for them more than the Democrats.
Sure.
Not just necessarily in the Bay of Pigs, but the Republican Party was much more anti-Castro and more in favor of overthrowing Castro too. And so I think the grandparents of these voters, passed down these values that explain the figures that a lot of Cuban Americans are voting and continue to vote for the Republican Party because it's perceived as a tougher party and a party that's more likely to challenge communist tyranny.
Yeah.
And it goes back, I believe, to the Bay Pigs. I think that's when it all started.
Sure. And I think that there's another incident that happened more recently, especially for Cuban Americans, was under Obama. One of the last things Obama did before he left office was he stopped the policy that if you were Cuban and you got here and you landed, you were safe. Mm-hmm. Now you land, and if you're still caught, they send you back to Cuba, which, obviously, like you mentioned, being a communist regime with a dictatorship, that doesn't play over very well when the Coast Guard say, hey, we brought you back. And, the regime is there waiting for you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's not a thing that plays over very well. So and that was one of the things he did right before he left office, one of his last acts. Which Cubans, it was like a slap in the face to us, to have someone that we thought that was supportive and was sympathetic to, our causes, us as a group, and for them to say, never mind, to us that was a big slap in the face.
So I think that also continuation of the perception.
Yeah.
And let's not forget too that many of the Cuban Americans who fled Castro came here were very entrepreneurial, business type people.
Yeah.
And in Florida, they've passed that down also to their, their kids and grandkids too. That, free enterprise is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I would say, now I know that the figures we're looking at here, 39% doesn't break it down, but I am certain that if we were able to do that, we would see that the vast majority of Cuban Americans in this poll did vote Republican.
Yeah.
Sure. Now,
for sure.
Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Central Americans, South Americans, quite a different story there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting subculture within the Hispanic Latino community, and which you are a part of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Again, I think it depends.
And you are on that side of the ideological spectrum,
and
as
because
well.
of the same reasons,
Largely.
Grandparents came over,
Yeah.
And I would love to one day maybe do a podcast episode on immigration and to have a few immigrants come and tell their story.
Yeah.
But I love hearing, and it was fascinating hearing my grandmother, she's since passed away, but to hear her tell that story of her coming here and my grandfather and them, they landed one day, 2 days later they were here in New Jersey. They both already had 2 jobs each, and they went through the town that they were in, literally picking up garbage off the street to furnish their place.
Really?
And it was people's old mattresses that they would sit there, and my great-grandmother would sit there scrubbing with Clorox and bleach. And, I don't know if you know those little cans for the coffee cans.
Oh, sure.
Those were the 4 legs of the bed.
Good God. Really?
So it's so, to me, it's something and it's my family that sends a shiver up my spine that they were able to come to this country, that they were able to so quickly, bring themselves up and work so hard. And it wasn't a thing that happened overnight. They came here with the clothes that they had on their back, and that was about it. But to me, it's so inspiring. And I think that's what has made me who I am today, and to be such a hard worker.
Probably so.
Is to know that they came over here and they had to figure it all out. They had to learn a language. My mom tells me all the time, I was thrown into class. I had no idea what anyone was saying. They didn't have ESL. They didn't have any of these programs. I just had to learn. I went and I got myself a job, and we each did, her 3 siblings, and we worked, and we then had to go, we would get a tutor, we would collect all of our money together, pay for a tutor to teach us.
Very strong work ethic.
To me, it's such an incredible story, not because it's my family, but I hear this, across the aisle, not only Cubans, but a lot of Hispanics have similar stories. And to me, it's just such an incredible thing.
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
really.
so I think we definitely need to do an episode on that, on immigration and stories of people coming to this country. So that's that.
Okay.
And the Asian vote, Dr. Rose, is actually, this one was surprising to me, was that it was 58 to 40. That 40% of Asians voted Republican.
Strong family values. Yeah. Once again, very strong work ethic. Merit-based culture.
Yeah.
And not surprising that we were very similar to the Hispanic Latino, that we're now up to 40% of Asians voting Republicans. You know, what you really see here in these polls is a very excellent opportunity for the Republican Party to have a big tent.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and for it to kind of move away from being known as the white guy's party.
Yeah.
Yeah, which it is today.
Yeah.
But there is so much opportunity here among Hispanic Latino voters, and as you can see from the polls, Asian Americans too. And then the next group you're going to talk about too.
This one really shocked me.
Yeah.
The American Indian vote, 37 to 58.
37% Democrat.
58% of them voted Republican. To me, I was like, when we were discussing this, because, you know, I skimmed these really quickly. I saw it and I was like, wait a second. That one really did shock me.
Well,
do you know why?
Well, again, I think it has to do with the entrepreneurial spirit of many Indian Americans.
Sure.
And many of them own businesses, and they have been very successful. They're also very, very talented as Asian Americans are, in the high-tech industries.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't surprise me that even though it was only 1% of the sample here, I'm not even sure what the percentage is in the American population. But it didn't surprise me that 58% of this demographic group was voting Republican.
Yeah.
Again,
you know, what I wonder is, and if we broke this down again, similar to the Latino vote, is I wonder if, depending on what region in the United States they come from, you know, tribe-wise, if that made a difference. Of, you know, whether they were Cherokee or whether they were the Seminole tribe. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now, here's my question.
Sure.
When we say American Indian, though.
Yeah.
I think
we're referring to Native Americans.
Are we talking about Native Americans or Indian Americans?
I believe we are, because Indian Americans, I believe, would fall under the Asian.
Yeah. Okay, so you think that...
I think this is
so
Native
that I was
American.
referring more to the...
to Indian American.
Yeah, okay, but you think this is more Native Americans?
I think it is, because it says American Indian.
American Indian. Yeah.
So I think it is Native American.
Okay, well, then you're right, and I'm wrong, probably. Okay, so we need to correct that, I guess. Yeah.
Because that's why, to me, it was shocking. Because, you know, I do agree with you.
Then I was thinking along the lines of Indian Americans as opposed to American. I just thought they had it written wrong here. Yeah. Okay. But they actually, I don't know why they didn't put Native Americans.
Yeah, that is weird.
You know what I mean? Yeah, so but you're probably right. So I retract what I said. And then now I'm completely confused why Native Americans would be voting Republican.
Exactly. That's why I was as confused, especially with such a large margin, with 37 to 58. Yeah. You know, to go back to Indian Americans. Yeah. I agree that they would fall into that same Asian category of, you know, the family. Yeah. You know, just customs within their culture. Yeah. And the entrepreneurship. But Native American, to me, I don't know, that one really got me out of all of these, was the Native American. Yeah, why? Because of the history that I guess the two parties have, that, you know, it boggles me. We're going to have to do a little bit more research on this.
And again, I'd like to know, just maybe we could do this after.
Sure.
Exactly what category of voter they were talking about there.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of Indian Americans or American Indians, I don't know, it's I always think maybe it should be Native Americans.
Native American.
Isn't that really? That's really more of the nomenclature today. And so, we need to look up in the poll who's being discussed here. You know what I mean?
As promised, we conducted research and concluded that the 2022 midterm exit polls by NBC was in fact referring to Native Americans and not Indian Americans. The confusion arose when looking at the data where the poll stated American Indians. As always, we want to bring relevant and up-to-date information to all of our viewers and promise to always follow through with this. we thought it would be appropriate to include it right on this episode and not wait until the next. And then here, this is similar to race, the last one, I believe. These numbers are basically identical to, there were very few that there was a discrepancy with.
No.
But, so it's basically the same. The only thing they categorized the American Indian in with other. Here, it was the only difference here at the top of this poll.
Yeah.
But then if we look at the race right under, that it's either white or non-white.
Yeah, that's a different category. Yeah.
That is a different category. So, yeah.
Well, I think we've covered that even better with the other ones. More detail.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I just think that, it's basically the same. It's, 40, 58 are white, and then non-white are 68, 30. Overwhelmingly, non-whites vote for the Democratic Party. So that's no surprise there, no shock. Then if we look at sex by race, do you want to go through that one to see the discrepancies between white men, women, black men, women?
Well, sure. Let's just real briefly on that. White men, which comprise 36% of the sample.
Sure. 63 of them are voting Republican.
That is really the base of the Republican Party. White men, very strong. We're talking almost 2/3 of that category voted Republican.
Yeah.
White men really can be counted on to support Republicans without a doubt.
If we look even at white women, it's 53% are voting Republican.
And there, you get into the what I was talking about before, that, there are women that are entrepreneurs, business people, and these white women that were voting Republican. I remember somebody once said, they're just following their husbands, which was such an insulting statement.
I agree.
Yeah, as if somehow a woman just has to follow her husband, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would say that that has to do probably with their own backgrounds, educational backgrounds, and the type of work they participate in.
Which
they're
we'll
not just following their husbands by any means.
Yeah. Then if we look at black men, overwhelmingly Democrat, 82%, even more for black women with 88. And then if we look at the Latino men and women, Latino men vote 43% of the time with Democrats, 45 with Republican, and then Latino women, it is a little bit more of a difference. You have 66, 2/3 of them voting with the Democratic Party versus 33 with the Republicans. And then finally down at the bottom, all other races. This one's a little bit closer and a little bit tighter. 49% with the Democratic Party and 47% with the Republicans.
Something to note here in these figures, you notice that of all the different demographic groups broken down by race, black women, 88% vote Democrat.
Yeah.
That is a really strong base within the party.
Yeah.
And, you just look at Congress, who the black women are, what party they're in, and so forth. So that really is a very strong constituency, loyal constituency to the Democratic Party. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with health care issues that we were talking about, reproductive rights.
Sure. And do you think that the Republican Party, if they did a better job at recruiting candidates that, fell in these different categories that weren't white men, that, they would do maybe a little bit better with these other groups?
Well, let's go back to our very first podcast in Connecticut politics. The Republicans fielded George Logan, who is both African-American and Latino, interestingly enough, to run against a black woman, Johanna Hayes, Congresswoman. And look how close that was.
Yeah.
And so I think that I don't know if that is, something that the Republicans can build on in the future. I'm not sure whether or not the pool of those possible candidates are as available as maybe some would like.
Sure.
But nevertheless, I think the Republican Party could, if they were smart, they could do a lot better job of fielding a more diverse slate of candidates.
Yeah.
And I think they could do much better. Sure. And
Absolutely.
they can't remain the white man's party.
No.
They have to.
Well, the party will die then.
That's right. They have to start appealing to other groups of people. But the polls that we're looking at here, the exit polls, do suggest that there is fertile ground out there, for the Republican Party to build a much broader coalition.
Absolutely.
It would be very encouraging to me if I was a consultant to the Republican Party, and I would know what groups to really start cultivating. Sure.
Well, I would definitely start, with all that, and that's going to be the last category of race for now. But I would definitely start with the Latino and Hispanic vote. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer to continue drilling,
absolutely,
keep going at it because, and then I think that there needs to be more strides made within the Black African American community, putting up more candidates that look like them. I said it all the time, and we discussed it this semester in Congress and legislative processes, that we need Congress to look a little bit more like the people. It's look at Congress and you look at the numbers, and maybe that's another episode that we could talk about is the makeup of Congress. But you look at it and it's not representative of the people, and it's not showing you really what their communities are made of. You have a lot of older white men representing very diverse communities. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing to have, a young candidate come in that, looked more like the people, whether they would be Latino, they would be, Black, Asian, come in and, run in that election. I think that would be something interesting for the Republican Party to be able to do.
And, if I could just comment about the black vote.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know it used to be a Republican vote?
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
Lincoln was a Republican.
Yeah.
And after the Civil War, African Americans were very much supportive of the Republican Party, and as you cross over into the 20th century, certainly they remained with the Republican Party. And it really wasn't until Roosevelt and the New Deal coalition during the Great Depression, and then continued on with some of Truman's policies, JFK's commitment to civil rights, Lyndon Johnson, all Democrats, where the realignment occurred. But most people don't realize that the black community in the U.S. used to be strongly Republican, and then it realigned. Yeah. And as they realigned, the white Southerners were realigning the other way. That's why it changed. That's why all of that changed.
Yeah.
So
now if we look at age, and I think this will be a category that's not very much a surprise to anyone.
Yeah, what's going on here?
Well, we'll start right away. Category 18 to 29.
Oh, wow.
63% Democrat, 35%
That's
Republican.
your age group.
That is my age group.
Yeah.
Kind of sad.
Now, your age group is very liberal.
It is, but I heard something, and it's something that a close family friend said, and I've heard other people say it. He says, when I was in college, I was a socialist, super liberal, all the way to the left. When I got out of college and I had to start paying bills and I had to start paying taxes, I very quickly became a conservative. And I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah, sure.
Because I love talking about, I went to a fair up in Mystic, and it was an arts fair, and I met this older gentleman, photographer, and we were talking, and he goes, when I was young, and he's like, I was born and raised here in Connecticut, which is a blue state, and my whole life, I was super to the left, super until, I started getting my life together. I got married. I started having kids. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah. I'm not really liking this. And little by little, he goes, I think every election I turn a little bit more conservative just because based on the policies. Yeah. He goes, now I'm 70-something years old, and I'd say I'm a solid Republican. Yeah. But, years ago, I would say that I was a strident socialist. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. And we talked for about an hour. But who knows if throughout the years this would change? Well, if as people go aging,
it might. It would be a fun. It'd be a lot. It'd be great to track, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Or they might stay forever and then continue on with that. And who knows if the younger generation will then flip and one day become more conservative. Yeah. I think we are seeing though more and more of the younger generation becoming a little bit more conservative.
You think so?
I think so. The conversations that I have with people here, Dr. Rose, both here on this campus, other campus, I'm not saying that, they're going to be, Trump supporters by any mean. And, I think that we've had the conversation in the last podcast.
You've noticed a change, though.
I have noticed a change. A lot of people, and we mentioned it in the first podcast, students here from Connecticut, a big concern to them is crime. And they're seeing that the Democrats are weak on crime here in Connecticut. So, you see a little, twist in their brain chemistry of saying, well, the Democrats that have been, elected here for years aren't going to support me, then maybe the Republicans are a better option. College has become so expensive and everything else. I mentioned going to the grocery store before. A lot of us, we have to go to the gas pump. We pay for our own gas. We do for a lot of, we're like, whoa. And I know people that unfortunately in college are working 2 and 3 jobs to be able to pay for gas, pay for groceries, pay for housing, and then whatever's left over, put a little bit to the side to pay for tuition. So it's, something that more and more, I really do think that the younger vote is going to become more conservative.
But I know your age group, though, based on the students I teach, very pro-choice.
Yes. Well, that was going to be my next point. I think it really depends also on gender.
And then
I think the young women are very. I think the main issue, because again, a lot of the people that I talk to are women because of the balance of this campus, and most of them say I'm only a Democrat because of the issue of abortion.
But how about also climate change? Isn't that a big issue for your age group too?
I think it is a big issue, Dr. Rose. But I think it's not as big of an issue as people think.
You really?
It's something that people, we like to call them, Twitter warriors or keyboard warriors, that they sit there and they're like clacking away and saying all this stuff. But I think when it really comes down to it, most people my age wouldn't support these exorbitant tax rates and all these different things that at the end of the day affect us, affect our ability to be able to take a step up in life, if you will.
All right.
So at least that's my opinion, and based on conversations that I've had with people my age.
But then it is without a doubt the most liberal age group, though.
It is
18 to 29, and again, we were talking earlier about glaring differences, and 63% voted Democrat versus 35% in that age group.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It is,
and that's again a challenge for the Republican Party. They've got to cultivate young people, young persons to come in, like yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think the other issue with the Republican Party, and from working on campaigns back in New Jersey, Republican candidates tend to be very stiff. Right? They're always dressed. I never forget Kim Guadagno. She ran for governor in the state of New Jersey. And there was a state fair that she was going to, and I told one of her campaign managers that I had started working on a congressional campaign with, and then they went rising up the ranks until they, ran that gubernatorial race. And I said, she's going dressed to the state fair like that. She looked like Hillary Clinton. She was in a pantsuit. I said, tell her to put on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie. Who goes to a state fair in a suit, in a pantsuit? That's not, so I think that Republicans, and I really liked her as a candidate, but I think Republicans, and we see this across the board, are very stiff, always, are dressed nicely, are always, not saying that that's a bad thing, because, you want that professionalism, you want that look, but I think they don't realize when to shut that off. You can't go to, an event like that, again, a state fair, dressed in a pantsuit. Put on sweatpants, put on a pair of jeans, put on sneakers, flip-flops.
Not the right image.
Yeah. So it's, again, I think that's the issue, just the look of it. The willingness to be able to jump on different trends and stuff. Now in the midterm election, you saw all these candidates, all these Democratic candidates on TikTok. TikTok is a really big thing with people our age, and they were able to infiltrate and get into, and that's how people decide to vote is, sadly, at least in my opinion, is through social media. And Republicans have done a horrible job at doing that, of getting onto Instagram, no one uses Facebook anymore. The younger generation, I think I might be one of the only ones in my generation left that still uses Facebook.
You're on Facebook?
I am.
I'm on MySpace.
You're on MySpace?
No, I'm only kidding.
I don't even think MySpace exists anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, goodness. But it's, the candidates are failing to youngify themselves. They don't have to be young, right? They don't have to be a 20-year-old candidate, but they have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to hire an intern that's going to do TikTok and an intern that's going to do this. And, all that stuff, you know, a lot of these communication students in this same building would love to do an internship on a campaign doing that. So that's interesting. But then if we jump into 30 to 44.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Sure.
I got to give a little credit to Conan O'Brien for the MySpace.
Yeah.
Because I remember heard him make a joke out of that
Yeah.
once. But, you know, you can see that as, just not to go through every single group here, but as obviously people get older, support for Republicans increases.
Because then if we jump to the age of 45 to 64, you have 54% of them are voting with the Republican Party,
That's right.
44 with the Democrats.
Yeah.
And then if we go to 65 and over, 55 with the Republicans and 43 with the Democrats.
Yeah, that's right. There's a 12-point spread, right?
Sure.
And so, it is, I guess, as the older you get. But the question becomes, as people in that older category start to pass on in life, does the country just become more democratic or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, kind of getting back to your point about young people, you think that maybe they start to realign somewhat as they get older. I don't know. I mean, it suggests that maybe they are doing that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that as you get older, you become a little more conservative and hence vote Republican. But I don't know. But I know that the students I teach now, even compared to students that I taught when I first got here, which is 41 years ago, are much more liberal. Yeah. Much more liberal. I mean, we used to be able to, in class, have wonderful debates over same-sex marriage.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Nobody even debates that anymore. It's a given.
It is.
And it's not debatable.
Yeah, no.
Nobody takes issue with it.
No.
And
I can imagine a lot of the
even
a lot of these issues that are today, you know, seen as the norm.
Yeah.
Back then, I could imagine the debates on same-sex marriage, on abortion, on even, I think, at some point in certain classes, interracial marriage even. Maybe not in your time as a professor, but in, you know, previous times, if professors do debates like you do, I think that would have been a topic of up for discussion as well.
Interracial marriage. Yeah, I'm not that old.
No, I know. That's why I'm saying it definitely not in your time.
Right.
But I think before, you know, I think that might have been too an issue that people took issue with.
Yeah, sure.
And then I think by race, I want to look at the two categories and the two breakdowns that come next. It's 18 to 44, because now they start doing the groupings a little bit different. Mm-hmm. 18 to 44, 55 with Democrats, 42 with Republicans. Mm-hmm. And then 45 plus, 44 with Democrats, 54 with Republicans. Mm-hmm. Not too shocking. Makes sense with the rest of everything that we looked at.
No shocking.
But then if we look at this next age category, Dr. Rose, and, you know, to compare it to this last sheet that we went over, the first age category that we went over, it was 18 to 29 year olds, 63 with Democrats, 35 with Republicans.
Yeah.
But then if you look with the way they chop this up a little bit differently, 18 to 24, you do see that they're more conservative. It's a slight difference, not much.
How much more, though?
But it's by 2 points.
Only 2, yeah.
But I think that more and more, even the younger, under 18,
2 points.
That I think is more conservative. That under 18 bracket.
Okay.
So I don't know. I find that a little interesting because it's not super off compared to rest, but it is a slight difference when you break it down to I don't know what generation it would be, but 18 to 24 is a little bit more conservative than the grouping of 18 to 29.
Yeah. I'm not too convinced of that, but I can understand where you're going on that.
Sure.
So
the age by race, there's, you know, it's in line with the rest of really the polls. It's basically a combination. Again, it's age by race of the age and the race category. So I think it would be redundant to go over.
It would be.
To go over that.
Yeah, I think.
Then I think the next big one is education.
Oh, yes.
Very interesting. You know, but again, it makes sense that you have people that have never attended college. You have 62% of them as conservatives, as Republicans, and 36 with Democrats.
Well, it is surprising if you were to track this over the last 40 or 50 years. you would not see those figures.
Really?
62% voting Republican who never went to college.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now that it the Democratic Party used to definitely attract working class voters and people who did not go to college.
Yeah.
But now that has flipped over.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of it, again, people have asked me, why is that? Like right here in Connecticut, the Republicans do well now in like the Naugatuck Valley.
Yeah.
That used to be a Democratic area, while did I say the Democrats?
No, the Republicans.
I said the Republicans,
Yeah.
Republicans. While the Democrats do well in Fairfield County, which is, one of the richest areas in the country.
Yeah.
And so why is that? I think a lot of it has to come down to something we talked about earlier. I think much of it had to do with the social justice agenda of the Democratic Party.
Sure.
And that white working class voters just felt that the Democratic Party was a little too accommodating to people, and who some of them maybe they felt didn't deserve some of the benefits they were getting, using tax dollars for these social programs, and they started to realign. And back in when Reagan was in office, you would often hear about Reagan Democrats, and that's really the beginning of this.
Okay.
Working class voters leaving the Democratic Party, and you can see in a big way in this last election, they clearly did. Yeah. And so class is no longer a predictor of voting behavior. And that's not to say that the Republican Party doesn't have any wealthy people. They do. But let's put it this way, it's nowhere near the predictor it used to be. Yeah.
Then I'm going to jump right to the very end of that, to people that have an advanced degree after a bachelor's, such as a JD, MA, MBA, an MD, or a PhD. 57% vote with the Democratic Party, 41% with Republicans.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I really do. I don't think that there's much, to me at least, there's not much of a surprise there.
No. Highly educated people today, people who get advanced degrees, they tend to be more progressive on issues.
But then if we jump into the next category of education, and we just look on a very broad scale, college graduates versus no college degree. College graduates, 54% Democrat, 44% Republican. So it's a little closer, though, compared to some of the other categories. And then no college, 43% with the Democrats, 55%.
Just flips, basically.
It does.
Just flips.
Yeah, it does.
Yep. That's right. They talk now about a diploma divide in American politics, and that's an interesting term. There's a racial divide, there's a gender divide, and now we have a diploma divide. And once again, further demonstrating just how in so many different demographic groups there is a deep division between voters.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now we'll jump into the next category that says no matter how you voted today, do you usually think yourself as a blank?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is no surprise here.
No surprise here. So again, the question for the viewers is no matter how you voted today, do you usually think yourself as a Democrat? 96% of them
voted
Democrat. Yeah. Oh, I think it's important to clarify. 33% of Democrats were polled for this question. 36% Republican, and 31% independent or something else. So, again, no matter how you voted today, do you usually think yourself as a Democrat? 96% of Democrats say Democrat, and that's how they voted. Republicans, the same thing, 96% voted with the Republican Party.
People vote as they perceive themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and then independents, this is closer, is 49% with Democrats and 47% with Republicans.
That's right.
And I think it's interesting because it's definitely something. I think more independents definitely skew to the left than they do to the right. Yeah. So I think this shows that perfectly, that it's not a big spread, but it's just enough.
2 points.
2 points, but it's just enough that there are more independents that are on the Democratic side than there are on
if
the
this was a Connecticut poll, the percentage would be much higher for voting Democrat.
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And, I would also venture to say here, without having all the evidence in front of me, though, if you look at the Democrats, people that perceive themselves as Democrats, 96% of them voted Democrat, and the same with Republican. I bet you a lot of that voting was straight ticket voting, too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Top of the ticket.
We've covered that in some of the other podcasts.
That's right. Top of the ticket down through the ballot. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it here in Connecticut, not to be repetitive of previous episodes, but, when you have a strong candidate at the top of the ticket, it's hard for some people not to just go boom, 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 boom,
That's
boom,
right.
boom.
Yeah.
Or as they used to, pull the lever for one party or the other. But yeah, I think that goes right along with what we've talked about in other podcasts. Absolutely. Then I think we could jump down.
I think we can jump over some stuff here.
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting. On most political matters, do you consider yourself very similar to the last question?
Yeah.
But a little different because it asks, liberal. 24% of people identified as liberal, 40% as moderate, and 36% as conservative. Mm-hmm. The ones that identified as liberals, 92% of them voted with the Democratic Party.
No surprise.
The ones that identified as a moderate, 56% with the Democratic Party. Yep. And then the conservatives, 91% with the Republican Party.
Not a big surprise.
Not a big surprise, no.
People perceive themselves in a certain way ideologically, vote
and then
that way,
that's
too.
what they fall.
No big surprise.
Yeah. I think then we're going to go into income. I think that's definitely a big spread, but I think we're going to go to the second category of income, under $50,000 or $50,000 or more, and then we'll jump into the $100,000 category. But when we're looking at people making under $50,000, I thought that there would be a bigger spread here. I thought that it would be overwhelmingly Democratic to vote. But it's not. It's closer together than I thought it would be. Yeah. 52% of them vote with the Democratic Party versus 45% with the Republican Party.
Yeah, now think about that. 45% of the voters who make under $50,000 are voting Republican.
Yeah.
That's where we're at today. Yeah. Again, getting back to our previous discussion, the class factor has really can't say it's completely gone, but it's nowhere near as pronounced as it once was. That's
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And then people making $50,000 or more, 45,
more.
it's basically flipped.
Yeah.
People, and then just based on the polling numbers, 70% of people polled made $50,000 or more, and then 30%.
Yeah, and think of that, 50 or more. I mean, you could be talking a lot more.
Yeah.
45% voted Democrat.
Yeah.
So where's the class variation? Not much.
There's really not.
I know, a lot of it's changed.
Variation,
right, yeah. So, yeah.
And then if we go then into the second category of income, under $100,000 or over $100,000, it's basically the same.
Yeah.
63% of people polled made under $100,000, 37% made over $100,000. Those that made under $100,000 were 48% Democrats, or voted 80% of the time. In this election, voted 80. I can't talk today. 48% of them voted with the Democratic Party versus 49% with the Republican. $100,000 or more, 46% with the Democrats, 53% with the Republicans.
Yeah.
So really not. It's basically the same as the previous poll.
Yeah.
And then if we jump down two categories, marriage.
Oh,
I think marriage is something that's very interesting today, especially with the divorce rate. In today's country, and I think that's there's another category in here for that, but the divorce rate, the last time I checked, was close to 50%. 1 out of every 2 couples will get divorced, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, you can see 58% of people who were married voted Republican. That's no big surprise.
No big
Single
surprise
people
either.
are more aligned with the Democratic Party, and people that are married live a more traditional lifestyle. Yes. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And they're also more likely to go to church, too, sometimes with their kids and stuff. And so that doesn't surprise me.
No, me neither.
You marry, you kind of work, you both work, or one, you come home, you kind of maybe have dinner together and things. Yeah. It's kind of a traditional way of living. And so marriage does that.
Yeah. And then if we skip down to children, do you have any children under 18 living in your home? 28% of respondents said yes, 72 said no, and those that said yes to having children under the age of 18 living in the house, 47% of them voted with the Democratic Party, 51 with the Republican. Those that said no was 48 and 50. So very, very tight. Really, it didn't really matter
hardly any division
whether
there.
if you had children under the age of 18 living in your home or not. You were basically, you fell in the same.
That's not really a
category.
Predictor.
No.
Marriage is a predictor.
Marriage is a predictor, and you do see it a little bit more with married with children. 55% of them voted Republican versus 42 with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So it could be. Then if we look at, are you gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender?
All the way down to the bottom.
All the way at the bottom.
Oh,
so we're looking at the LGBTQIA plus community.
Oh gosh, no surprise.
No surprise. 7% of them said yes. And out of those that said yes, 84% of them voted with the Democratic Party.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a strong part.
14% with the Republican. No surprise there. And it's
no
very
surprise.
understanding. There's a lot of rhetoric coming from the Republican Party or certain candidates within the Republican Party. Many are attributing the rhetoric in today's politics to the shooting that just happened in Colorado Springs. I believe it was in Colorado Springs. So and then those same politicians that are constantly spewing anti-gay, anti-lesbian, anti-LGBTQ community rhetoric were the first ones to get on Twitter and say, oh, thoughts and prayers with that community.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, that's all they could give is thoughts and prayers after all the rhetoric that they spew.
Yeah, that really means almost nothing sometimes. Yeah.
But then if you see then no to the people that responded no to that, 45% with the Democrats, 53% with the Republicans.
Yeah, right.
So it's that people that voted that are no, not part of that community, are very much in line again with the rest of the polling data.
There are what Lincoln Republicans that are part of the gay and lesbian community, if I'm correct on that. But
is it the log cabin Republicans? No.
Log cabin Republicans. You're right. Log cabin Republicans. Yeah. Yeah, there are Lincoln Republicans too. Those are the anti-Trump people. That's right.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting that. Log cabin Republicans, but they are few and far between, apparently. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Then the next category, I think, which is a little interesting, is the union. Unions are a big powerhouse in today's political, environment. Is the endorsements of the unions. For these candidates, no matter what type of union you are, most unions will make an endorsement, and it's typically for the Democratic Party.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, unions have always been an arm of the party, although there have been some unions that have not been affiliated with the Democrats, like the Teamsters.
Yes.
Jimmy Hoffa, who has vanished, of course. The Teamsters actually were more Republican at the time, I remember. But normally, you're right, labor unions. A really integral part of the Democratic Party.
And now you're seeing for the first time in New Jersey, I think it was with the last gubernatorial election, for the first time in history, at least that I could remember, the police union was endorsing the Republican. Because and that makes sense with everything
the
happening
crime
today.
Issue. Sure.
But then if we look at that, anyone in your household belonged to a labor union, those that said yes, 57% of them voted with the Democrat, and those that said no, 52 voted with the Republican.
Yeah, there's somewhat of a divide there.
A little bit of a divide, but not too much.
Not great, no.
Then if we look at white born-again or evangelical Christian, it was something that we discussed in the last podcast episode of why Mike Pence was chosen to be vice president, was because to balance out the ticket, Trump needed the evangelical vote in order to get to the White House. And we see that very clearly here.
83%.
83% of them that that said yes to being white, born again, or evangelical Christians voted with the Republican Party.
Not at all surprising here.
No, not at all.
No, not at all surprising. And that has always been, ever since the born again movement started.
Yeah.
And I know something about that because I did teach for my first full-time position was in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
At Southwest Missouri State. And we actually did, myself and two other political scientists, we did some of the very, very first studies of the evangelical movement.
Interesting.
Yes, involving their political views. And clearly, this is a a component of the Republican Party today.
I wonder if that same study that you conducted back when you were in Missouri, if you conducted that same study again, if the results would be very similar.
It was just starting up then.
Yeah. And
I remember at and their views were very different compared to evangelical and non-born again. And I remember in a paper I was presenting, a person asked, "Is this a flash in the pan or is this long term?"
Yeah.
Because it was just something new then, you know. I remember saying, "I'm not sure." I said, "It's very difficult to tell if this is just a passing type of development or if it's long term." But I think we have seen now that it really is long term, deeply ingrained among some people. Yeah. And again, if we did a regional breakdown, you would see where it's really located. It's not around here in Connecticut, but you get out into the Midwest and the South, out into the Bible Belt. Oh, it's very strong. Yeah. Churches everywhere. And a lot of them are mega churches too. You know, they're not really they're Protestant churches, but they're not really, with a particular denomination. You know, it's not like they're Baptist churches or Episcopal churches. I mean, they do have born again components of some of those churches, but a lot of them tend to be more just, just general non-denominational Protestant type churches, large churches too, some of them, and a lot of people involved in those churches.
No, absolutely. And it's, when you look at the endorsements come down by the pastors, or the ministers, not sure, the reverends, what their titles would be, of these mega churches, their endorsements carry a lot.
Oh, sure they do.
When you look at the churches down south that might not be, evangelical or born again, but you see the Black Baptist churches, those endorsements, also carry very heavily. Right. And you typically see these politicians, especially in the presidential election, going to these churches and doing talks.
They do.
And trying to garner that support.
Yes, they do.
So it's very interesting. Then with religious services, no surprise there.
Another prediction you can make. I know a political scientist who said he thought that one of the most predictive variables in American politics was the rate of church attendance. Yeah. And those people who do tend to go to church, as this poll shows, once a week or more, are Republicans. Yeah.
I would love to conduct a poll here, if it would be possible, to see how that would pan out.
Among students who attend?
Yeah.
Chapel?
Yeah.
Really? What a great study that would be.
I think that'd be really interesting.
Why don't you do the study? That'd be great. I'd love to see that.
To be able to, I don't know how many people would respond to my poll.
Let's see if church attendance makes a difference around here.
Yeah, but I wonder, I would say that, the campus is pretty split with people, at least by the conversations that I've had. But I wonder if, because it's the same group of people that always go to Mass every Sunday, at least when I go at the 7 o'clock Mass. And it's interesting to see, it would be interesting to see where these individuals fall in the political spectrum, and whether this is the case that, they go every Sunday, whether they would be more conservative or not.
They might be.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would have to, maybe that's something that I could do.
I think that'd be a good study.
We'll have to follow up on that.
Good study, yeah.
Maybe I might have to write a thesis after all.
There you go. Yeah, sure. And so that plays out again in the following poll. You can see when they break it down into two simple categories. Once a week or more, or occasionally, versus never. Notice 66% of the people who never go to church voted Democrat. Yeah. So
I would say a majority of the Democratic Party are, they're, I guess, they don't believe.
I don't know. Is it that they don't believe, or they just don't?
Well,
go
I don't
to
know.
Church?
A lot of
What
people that I talk to that are Democrats, when you talk with, I like to poke and prod and see a lot of different
they don't believe
categories. A lot of them are atheists. And they identify, when I ask, if you don't mind, what religion are you? Which is, my mother always says, of course, I always start off with the political conversation, then I try to wrap religion into it. My mother always said, never ask people about politics, religion, or how much money they make. I just don't get into the last category of it, but I get into the first two. A lot of them here and around, my friends that I see and that I meet across the country tend to be atheists. If they,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you think there are more non-believers in the Democratic Party? Probably so.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
so. I don't know if church attendance is an indication of anything, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people that go to church regularly, but quite frankly, I don't like them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not sure I trust them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that have facades.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think they do. And I think it's something that you see down south a lot too.
Yeah.
With, oh, bless your heart, sweetheart.
Yeah, right.
You know, they're the wickedest person.
Yeah.
But, you know, they go to church every Sunday and sometimes more than once a week. But that would be another interesting study to conduct. Maybe Sacred Heart could send me down south for me to conduct some polls.
I like your idea
too.
of a study right on campus, though, the impact of church attendance on political views.
Yeah.
I don't know. This next one is real interesting.
Well, I think this is one that, you know, I had no doubts that it would be this way. Does anyone in your household own a gun? For those of you, 53% of individuals said yes, 47% said no. The individuals that said yes, 66% of them, 2/3, voted with the Republican Party.
Republicans are gun owners.
They are.
Yeah, they
and then the ones that said no, 68 were voted Democrat.
Democrats.
I think there's no surprise there. I mean, you see it in the debates that are had today, and where people, you know, believe certain things and whatnot. No doubt there. And then at the bottom, we have one that's cut off. Have you ever served in the U.S. military? I'm going to take a prediction before I look at the next page and say the ones that have served in the military are predominantly Republican.
Of course.
You flip over, So it's those that said yes, 62% of them are Republican. Those that said no, 50% of them are Democrat.
Yeah, I think all of these demographic factors that we've looked at continue to show, and I know then the other questions get real detailed and stuff about preferences of Biden and so forth, but I think it's very clear that there is people have very different views, and that demographic characteristics of people can be a predictor of how they're going to vote and their views on politics.
Highlighting a few of them.
Which ones
that I would like to cover?
What other ones?
Then on this next page, do you think Joe Biden's policies are mostly let me see, are you on that page too?
Helping the country?
Yeah, down there. Helping the country, hurting the country, or not making a difference. So for the individuals that said that Joe Biden's policies are mostly helping the country, no brainer. 95% of them voted with the Democratic Party. Those that believe that his policies are hurting the country, 94 with the Republicans.
No big surprise.
And those that think that his policies are really not making a difference, 71 are voted Democrat.
No big difference.
No big difference.
No.
You know, it's something that, you know, I think makes sense.
No big difference.
Then if we no
big surprise.
No
big difference, but no big surprise.
Yes.
Right.
No surprise, but there is a big difference and a big, you know, polarization there with that question. Right. Then if we go to the next page and we're talking about which one of these 5 issues mattered most in deciding how you voted today, the different issues were crime, abortion, inflation, gun policy, and immigration. Those that crime mattered the most, 57 voted with the
Republicans.
Party. Those that found abortion to be the biggest issue, 76 Democrat, inflation, 71 Republican, gun policy, 60% Democrat.
That would be for gun regulation.
They want gun regulation. And those with immigration as the issue that mattered most, 73% Republican.
That's right. No surprise.
No surprise.
No surprise.
Makes a lot of sense. Then who do you trust more to handle the issue of foreign policy? Those that said the Democratic Party, 95 with the Democrats. Those that said the Republican Party, 92 for the Republican Party. Then I think the economy is an important one to touch base on. Do you think the condition of the economy is excellent, good, not so good, poor? For excellent, there wasn't enough data to report on. But then if we look at the people that think that the nation's economy is good, 89% with the Democrats. Not so good, 62% with the Democrats. Poor, 88 with the Republicans. Again, no real surprise there.
No surprise here.
We know that the economy is not doing well. It's hurting many people. It's hurting people's pockets. But, I guess people like to turn a blind eye when it comes to certain things.
What other issues you want to talk about here?
I think gas prices. Have gas prices been a financial hardship on you recently? Those that said yes, 64% of them were Republican. Those that said no, 73% were Democrat.
Voted Democrat.
I find that very interesting. Because I think gas prices really hurt everyone.
It would hit everyone.
You would think that it would hit everyone. Everyone everyone drives.
It could be that Democrats are a little more tolerant.
Could be that they're more tolerant. Could be that maybe they all have electric vehicles. You never really know.
I don't know about
what it could be. But I think gas prices definitely have hurt everyone in the past few years. And I don't really think it matters, where you fall on the spectrum. Another no-brainer, student loan debt. How do you feel about Joe Biden to cancel it? Those that approve were a majority Democrat. Those that disapprove, majority Republican. Same with gun control and gun measures. Climate change overwhelmingly.
Big difference on perceptions of climate change.
Absolutely. Majority Democrats. Those that think that it's not a serious problem were Republican. A lot of these issues make sense. And, I think what I might do when I post this podcast is I will take snippets of this and put it right up on so people could see the exact numbers while we're talking about them.
That'd be fascinating. And it'll be in color?
It'll be in color so that people could see. Is racism in the United States a major problem? 73% said yes, or 73% of them, the Democrats said that it was a major problem and they voted Democrat. Racism in the U.S. a minor problem. 74% were Republicans. And not a problem.
No big surprises in any of these findings.
No, I think a lot of these, the more we dive into this, the more and more it makes sense. Then if we look the democracy, this one does surprise me a little bit, Dr. Rose. Do you think democracy in the United States is secure or threatened? 46% of Democrats, or of people that said that it was secure, 46 voted Democrat, 52 Republican. Threatened was 50% voted Democrat, 48 Republican. You would think that, at least in my eyes, especially after last week's episode talking about January 6th, the insurrection and the rhetoric that certain Republicans have, you would think that this would be a much wider spread. Right?
Yeah, you
Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, I would think so too. I was a little surprised at that.
Yeah.
Do you think democracy in the U.S. today is secure? And 52% voted Republican.
Yeah. But 46
but
of
then
them,
50% of people who said it was threatened voted Democrat. It's almost an even split.
It is.
So
I find that to be very interesting.
I thought there would be more of a divide on that issue.
Yeah.
Some of these issues, don't show a divide, but so many of them do.
Yeah.
I think some are outliers a little bit.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these are, we know where they're, do you think that Joe Biden legitimately won the presidency? Opinions of the Democratic and Republican Party? Is the Democratic Party too extreme? We are seeing that a lot of this makes a lot of sense. And there's really no big surprise. Opinions on Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. So really, to me, there's no surprise when we get into these nitty-gritty polls.
I don't think so.
No. I think the last one that I do want to cover is on the very last page, and is the national region of where you come from. 20% of individuals polled said that they live in the East. 23% said Midwest. 34 said the South, and 22 said the West. So those individuals that said the East...
Well, the East, 55%.
55% Democrat.
Democrat, that's not surprising.
No. I thought it would be more, though.
Oh, you thought it would be more?
I thought it would be more.
Okay. East can be a pretty broad area.
Well, it is, because, I guess you're going all the way down into Florida.
Right.
So...
Midwest, Florida, I don't know exactly how they categorize the East.
I don't either, because it says East and South.
Yeah, the Midwest, of course, a little more Republican, not
a little
surprising.
bit more Republican.
The South, very Republican, not at all surprising
with
there.
57% Republican.
Yeah, I was in the West. You see, now the West is a broad category. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Was it California, Oregon, Washington?
How far over does it come into
or do we also include, Montana and Wyoming and so?
Yeah. So I think maybe they could have specified these regions a little bit more.
Would have been better.
Well, that's why I wanted to touch upon it, because there doesn't seem to be much of a divide. It's very split down the middle. With some of these, but
I don't think that national region survey tells us much.
No,
I really don't, because it doesn't really break it down enough.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to call NBC and tell them to redo these.
Yeah, right.
But, I think, Dr. Rose, we had a very great conversation today.
Yes, we did.
With, what's going on today in our country, the polarization on many of these issues. Again, the name of this podcast is Exit Polls and Polarization. And I think this packet here did a really good job at talking about the polarization, especially on specific issues. And I will put up the link when this gets uploaded. But you see some of these like this. On this page, everything seems to be very, very, equal. But then if I flip to another page, we see a page like this, and you see that people are really split on some of the issues. And these are opinions of the Democratic Party and Republican Party. So it really does depend on the question. And I think it's interesting to see what topics make the American electorate more polarized and more divided, and what are the topics that really unite the people. I think it would be nice to see maybe politicians focusing on more of the topics that unite the people and making policy around that. Maybe we could have somewhat more of a united country if politicians did that. But for now, Dr. Rose, I would think that
it has to start from the top.
It does.
I've often been asked what's going to heal the country, and I've always said time and time again that there has to be models.
Yeah.
Models at the top.
Yeah. And right now we don't have those models.
We don't have models. We don't. And Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Bush himself. We're talking about dividers, not uniters. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is where it has to start. Some say, "Oh, don't you think it really has to come from the bottom up?" Yes, that helps, but I do believe that modeling is very important.
It's like a trickle-down system. I think,
we had somebody who can model unity and fairness and tolerance.
Absolutely,
I think that could work its way. It could go a long ways in our system. So I think, honestly, who we elect as president, the whole thing with Joe Biden was he was supposed to be a uniter, and he was going to heal the soul of the country. None of that has happened.
No.
It's more divided than ever. We just documented it right here.
Yeah.
2 years into his presidency, look how divided it is.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know
either. Hopefully not continue down this path.
Yeah, I know.
I would love to see America get back into a place where, we could have civil discussions and people aren't clawing at each other's throats. Yeah. And that we could really just focus on the things that really will make a difference for the people. Yeah. But we'll have to see when that time comes around and when that will happen. But Dr. Rose, I think for now, that's it for this week's episode.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you very much. Well, this episode will be coming out, I think, 2 weeks after Thanksgiving.
Always good to be on the show with you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for everything. Sure. And I really appreciate being here. And we'll update you guys on what the next topics will be and what will be happening in the upcoming episodes. Thank you very much, as always, for supporting us, for listening to our podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our LinkedIn page so that you could always stay on top of everything that we're pushing out. Until then, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.